There's been some talk about the Adkins woman having said something to a cellmate which gave you a lead, but it's my understanding, correct me if I'm wrong, that she simply confirmed some of the things you already knew.
She confirmed some of the things we already knew, and she did tell us some new things which we hadn't heard before.
Mm-hmm. Now, how about a man I've heard of, a burglary suspect in your Venice division, who also supplied some information?
Yes, he supplied the information a few days after we had originally started our investigation and had talked with the sheriff's investigators on the Hindman case. This man who was in jail in the Venice division did supply some information and names of additional people who might help us and supply additional information.
Aside from the people we've just mentioned, are there any other persons, men or women, who have supplied additional information for you? Perhaps you can't give us their names at this time, but...
No, I can't give you their names, but there was another girl who assisted prior to Susan Atkins starting to talk. Her name was given to us by the sheriff's office. She had also assisted in the Hindman.
Turn around once, girls, will you? Turn around here, girls.
First of all, I believe it's very clear that Mr. Manson always has been denied counsel of his choice in this matter. Back in December, he was asking to have Mr. McKissick and Mr. Steinberg as his attorneys of record, and I would hope possibly to try and get them involved in this case, possibly even to substitute out and have them substitute in.
Is this your first case that you'll be trying?
Yeah, this will be the first case that I've ever tried.
How long have you been an attorney?
Just since last June.
And why did you want to get into this one?
Well, I believe that there are a lot of things going down in this case, just as in the Chicago 7 cases, and there's a lot. I think you would have a much better shot if you weren't talking with me, but you were picking up some of the friends of Manson over there who were singing.
Are you going to go ahead with the psychiatric examination?
No, we've withdrawn the psychiatric examination. I've seen Mr. Manson in county jail for probably more than any other attorney, 70, 80 times, and it's certainly my feeling that Mr. Manson is sane. There's no question about his sanity in my mind.
Do you feel you're capable of defending that?
I believe that probably, as Mr. Manson stated earlier, that no man is capable of representing another, and that I feel that it's unfortunate that the court is screwed around, if you pardon the expression, with Mr. Manson's representation, that it's because of the things that the court has done that Mr. Manson was originally forced to go pro.
Ron Hughes just told me that this will be the very first case he's ever tried of any kind. Do you see him substituting out a little later and Mr. Manson substituting someone else in?
I cannot predict what
Mr.
Manson will do.
Well, how long legally can a defendant keep substituting attorneys?
I think that this will be his last substitution because he has chosen Mr. Hughes. He's consulted with Mr. Hughes on at least a dozen occasions that we know of. And so he knows what he's getting when he asks for Mr. Hughes. And Mr. Hughes can also consult with the other attorneys who have many years of practical experience and trial experience.
What's your answer?
Good morning. Good morning.
Ray? Somebody else.
Yeah. Hey, Rich. Rich. Mr. Hughes, give us your Would you give us your comment on the procedure in there today?
Well,
You've been
first-
substituted in as Mr. Manson's attorney. Sure,
Experience at all?
No, I'm not.
you feel you're fully capable of defending a man charged with 3 counts of conspiracy and 4 counts of murder?
Well, he's charged actually with 7 counts of murder and only 1 count of conspiracy. Allow him to have associate counsel, and then from other things that the court has done, this has later forced the court to take that pro per status away. Mr. Manson at points was getting very close to a number of truths, exposing the system of criminal justice that we have in this country, that a man who is allowed to defend himself is, on paper, is allowed to defend himself, but in actuality, he was not allowed to defend himself. As you recall, at one point, Mr. Manson wrote a letter to the district attorney pointing out that the terrible odds that he was at, that the district attorney had these wonderful facilities in which to try and convict him and seek his death, and yet Mr. Manson had to wait for an hour and a half to make a 10-minute phone call.
You said
Seek the pro per status again.
I would hope to get Mr. Manson's pro per status back. I imagine that will be very difficult, and it might very well be impossible.
Tell us something about yourself, Mr. Hughes.
Reiner came into court this morning with a signed motion in his briefcase making him the attorney of record. Yet Manson substituted you in at the last moment. Was this a last-minute decision? Did he have something up with Ira Reiner until he came into court this morning?
I'm really not sure about that.
Mr. Hughes, you first.
Now, let's talk to Aaron. Roll on this. Where do we stand in this matter now?
Well, we stand that was set for trial on April the 20th, 1970. The case is presently set in Judge Keene's court. Next week on March 24th, Ms. Krenwinkel makes a motion for a change of venue and for a motion to dismiss. If those motions are denied, then her case too will be set as it is now for April the 20th. We're prepared to go to trial now, and we're prepared to go to trial against this so-called common defense.
Is due to go to trial the 23rd of April in Santa Monica on another matter. She's due to go to trial here on the other matter.
Yes.
Now, how's it going to work out?
Well, she can't be in 2 places at once, so if this trial starts before the other one will have to wait for her to get finished
It'll
here.
have to trail then.
Yes.
Thank you.
Several things happened today, among which is that Mr. Manson's petition for a writ of habeas corpus, the court held that inasmuch as Manson was not pro per at the time he filed that motion, that he did not have standing to file the motion with the court. He had an attorney of record, Ronald Hughes. Hughes should have filed the petition for a writ of habeas corpus. With respect to Susan Atkins' motion to set aside her admissions and confessions at the grand jury, the court held that the motion today was premature, and the trial court would have to hear that motion once the trial commenced.
Mr. Cavallaro and I were subpoenaed as witnesses by Mr. Shin, Miss Atkins' attorney, and on the representation by Mr. Stovitz of the District Attorney's Office that the people would not rely upon her confessions or admissions or statements. The judge ruled the matter was not before the court this morning, and the entire matter went off calendar.
Does this mean that her grand jury testimony will likely not be entered in the Manson trial?
At this moment, that is the indication, yes.
Day, you represent Susan Atkins.
That's correct.
Now, I understand the rumor is, and maybe you can confirm it or deny it, that she is going to deny that everything she said on the witness stand in the grand jury is true.
That's correct. She's going to deny all her statements made at the grand jury.
No song today.
Paul, the judge put off calendar the motion to suppress certain evidence by Susan Atkins.
That's correct, Dick.
Now, maybe you can't comment on it this time. That Susan claims that she was inadequately represented by Mr. Caballero, and that the whole thrust of the defense was to sell a book.
Oh, that is totally untrue. I have personal knowledge that Mr. Caballero was going to save Susan Atkins' life. Now we'll see what happens. I can say that with some authority, that Susan Atkins couldn't have been better represented by any lawyer in this country. And when you consider the scope of the offenses that are charged in the indictment, and you realize that Mr. Caballero, in effect, saved this young lady's life, I think any statement that she was not adequately represented is totally unwarranted.
Without using the grand jury testimony, would you have an estimate, being familiar with the case, about what the state will have to rely upon now?
Well, from independent knowledge not gained from Ms. Atkins, I've learned that there are independent witnesses to whom she's made statements, quite apart from grand jury testimony. And of course, the people have substantial circumstantial evidence upon which they can rely. And I think that will be the main thrust of the prosecution's case.
Thanks, Paul. Craig, are these records subpoenaed in ducis tecum in regard to the removal of Susan Atkins from the facility at any time?
Yes, we received a subpoena ducis tecum for records of removal and visits during the month of December.
But you were not called to testify today, so undoubtedly you can't discuss what's in there.
That's correct, sir.
But they do pertain to Susan Atkins.
Yes, they are records concerning her stay at Sybil Brand.
And you're the head ramrod over at the jail.
Jail commander, yes, sir.
Thanks, Craig, very much.
Does this have something to do, Craig, with her activities in the jail?
The subpoena is for removal records, orders to remove her from the jail for various appearances, and for persons who visited her during the month of December.
You would have to explain that to me if you can. Remove her where?
A removal order is when a judge orders that a person is taken to a certain court, like the grand jury or a different court to testify. Any court order is a removal order.
Let me ask you this, Craig, and if you can't comment, just say so. Do these records have anything to do with Susan Atkins being taken from the jail to the attorney's office in Beverly Hills?
I don't think that I can disclose the content of the order, sir.
All right, thanks, Craig.
Thanks, Craig.
Vince, succinctly as you can, what happened in that grand jury is true. Will she be subject to perjury?
She may be. I don't know. She may be.
What will you advise her to do in this instance?
Well, we were trying to have a hearing today to strike a testimony at the grand jury hearing.
Mm-hmm.
And if they do strike that, then they would have to dismiss the indictment. Then they may pursue her for maybe perjury.
I see.
But perjury is better than murder.
Thank you, Dave.
Okay.
Paul, you asked for and were granted a discovery motion in the court this morning. What's that for?
Well, we'd previously asked that the prosecution turn over to us statements of people who had confessed to the Tate and the LaBianca homicides. We also asked that the prosecution turn over to us substantial evidence they had in their possession that would indicate that persons other than the now defendants committed the Tate-LaBianca killings. We want to examine at length and very carefully the statements of other people, the physical evidence of other people. There are a number of people who are prime suspects in the offenses before the court, and we just don't have that information at this time, and we need it in order to prepare our defense. Our defense may well be that persons other than Charles Manson, Patricia Krenwinkel, Leslie Van Houten et al. Committed this offense. There is substantial evidence in existence that people other than them committed this offense.
Thank you, Paul, very much.
In my opening statement, I said that these murders were perhaps the most bizarre, savage, nightmarish murders in the recorded annals of crime. And I think that Linda Kasabian's testimony on that witness stand today illustrated what I was saying in my opening statement. She was filled with emotion in describing the first night of horror, the first night of terror, there's no words to describe what she was saying, and only she was there that night. She heard the unbelievable screams, the pleading, the begging. How do you describe what happened that night other than in her words?
What was her vantage point?
Her vantage point, she was in the driveway at first, and she heard these horrible, horrendous screams coming from men and women, constant screams, pleading for their lives, coming from inside the residence. At that point, she ran up to the residence. She wanted the carnage to stop. She saw Frykowski coming out the front door. His face was bathed in blood. He fell into a bush. He staggered up. Then he fell into the lawn. She saw Tex get on top of him, stab him repeatedly, club him over the head. Frykowski was struggling, begging, pleading for his life. He was screaming. And contemporaneous with that, she saw a woman in a white gown who has been identified now as Miss Folger running in the back part of the lawn, and Patricia Krenwinkel chasing after her with an upraised knife. That's basically been her testimony with respect to the murders. Now, she did not see the murder of Sharon Tate or Jay Sebring. The testimony will show that that took place, of course, inside the residence. She, of course, also did testify that she saw Tex point the .22 caliber revolver inside the driver's side of the vehicle and shoot Stephen Parent to death by firing the gun 4 times.
Has she always been this emotional in describing these events?
Every time she comes up to this point, she cannot contain herself and she starts to cry. She's a very sensitive, delicate girl, and I think you glean that from her testimony today on that witness.
She was not in on the plot from the beginning, she claims, and she didn't know what was going on until she got there.
Well, her testimony is she thought they were going out on a creepy crawling mission, which was described by her as a mission wherein the members of the family would dress in black and go into strangers' homes in the middle of the night, creeping and crawling and stealing what belonged to them in the first place. Perhaps the correct word would not be steal in their mind. These sex orgies per se have no independent significance. However, you heard Linda's testimony today. Mm-hmm. She said that he was calling all the shots at that sex orgy. He was the one that was deciding when the orgy would commence, who would touch whom. There was no sexual activity until he gave that instruction. We are offering this as one further indication of Manson's power and control and dominion over that family. We don't intend to tell the jury that out of a clear blue sky, he ordered his co-defendants to commit these murders. And this was the first order he had ever given other members of the family. We are putting on previous contacts with the member of the family, his association with them, his relationship with them, as circumstantial evidence that on the 2 nights in question, it was he who ordered these 7 murders. The sexual conduct per se, as I've indicated, has no significance.
Shouldn't say that she attempted to smuggle a note. She handed a note to Charles Melton, who was with me, and he gave it to Linda. We've never kept anything from Linda that they've sent in. I'm tired of it. I think it's time they let her do as she pleases. They've attempted for months now, even going so far as to sit down in front of my law office to intimidate her and me. I got a phone call a couple of weeks ago from a guy about 8:30. He says, if Linda Kasabian takes the witness stand, neither of you will ever leave the courtroom. And I said, at nighttime, I said, look, do me a favor. If you're going to threaten me, do it during office hours. I'm tired of it at night. This is just another example of this kind of damn foolishness. There's nothing we can do about it. It was upsetting to Linda. It was right before she went on the stand. I was followed all the way upstairs to where she was, and she tried to force her way in and screamed out, in addition to that, something to Linda which was incoherent. And we're just bloody tired of it, period.
Well, is there anything that the district attorney's office or the court should do about this or can do about it?
That's up to the district attorney. It's been many years since I was in that position. All we want to do is have her finish testifying and leave town.
That I might point out that Sandra Good is a friend and acquaintance of Linda Kasabian. I don't see anything improper in attempting to speak with her. I mean, I don't know the circumstances and the rules and regulations regarding the passage and notes in the Hall of Justice, but I on the face of it, I don't see anything improper.
Certain weapons which were taken to the Tate mansion, she testified to certain killings and things she saw. Can you relay to us what she said on the stand?
Well, it's hard to summarize a full day's testimony, Dick.
Anything substantial she said this afternoon that you hadn't heard from her before?
No, the prosecution, in fact, any attorney worth his salt, does not call a stranger to the witness stand. I've talked to Linda for hours, and I'm not going to deny that. And I'm sure that the defense, when they call their witnesses to the stand, they've spoken to them. You don't call someone to the stand and say, where were you on a particular night, and have the person say, I don't know what you're talking about. On this particular night, I was in Beirut, Lebanon. I have no idea why you're calling me to the stand. You talk to them and find out what their testimony is going to be and determine that it's relevant. So her testimony did not surprise me. Night, she had no idea, according to her testimony, that murders were going to be committed.
You have some idea how she's going to bear up under cross-examination?
I think she's going to hold up very, very well, Dick. When a person tells the truth, as I believe she is, it's pretty hard to destroy that person's credibility.
Vince, with
How
all
do you
the
think the other
obstructionist
defendants are
tactics,
taking this? Have you been looking at the other defendants? How do you think they're taking it?
I'm so caught up in the questions and answers of our star witness that I'm really not looking to my left.
Paul, I understand that you and perhaps some of the other defense attorneys are a little unhappy about certain Manson family members being excluded from the courtroom by method of subpoena.
That's correct. First, I don't believe there is such a thing as the Manson family, but a rather loose confederation of people who temporarily reside at what's known as the Spawn Ranch are the people I was referring to. And every time these people come to court as members of the public to witness the proceedings, the prosecution serves them with a subpoena and has them excluded from the courtroom. Now, if the prosecution legitimately intends to call these persons as witnesses, obviously we have no objection. But to say the least, these are hostile, reluctant witnesses for the prosecution. If anything, they could conceivably be defense witnesses, but certainly not prosecution witnesses. And it's our position that they deliberately subpoena these persons and exclude them from the courtroom so that they're not there while certain of their witnesses testify, namely Linda Kasabian.
You don't think they would try to influence her by looks, by signals, by standing in the courtroom and saying anything?
Well, I think the prosecution feels that the mere presence of some of Linda Kasabian's contemporaries and contemporaries of Manson and Van Houten and Krenwinkel would intimidate her. I suggest that if she's telling the truth, they don't have any problems.
Yesterday, you know, one of the family members, or one of the Confederate members, as you put it, did attempt to smuggle a note to Linda. And it seems to me that is a form of intimidation.
I'm not aware of that.
Yes, Sandra Good attempted to deliver a note to Linda on the 9th floor yesterday afternoon.
Well, I'm not.
Gary, yesterday one of the family members, Sandra Good, attempted to smuggle a note to your client, Linda Kasabian, which in my mind is a form of intimidation. Do you have anything to say?
Trial, Mr. Knarrick's had quite a reputation for being an obstructionist. Do you think that's a pretty good description of the man's tactics in a courtroom?
I better not say anything directly on that, John. All I can say is this. You've observed him for 5 weeks. You saw his demeanor. And now the trial has really got underway, and I think you will agree with me that there's been a dramatic change between the Knarrick you saw for 5 weeks and the Knarrick you're seeing now. I think you'll all agree with me on that.
Could you speculate on his motives?
To speculate on the motives behind Mr. Knarrick's doing anything would be a rather unprofitable undertaking.
Is he laying groundwork for the appeal of this case?
Again, I don't know that. This might be his motive, but I think you'd have to ask him directly on that.
How much longer do you think Linda will actually be on the stand?
I expect that Linda will be under direct examination for at least 1 more day, perhaps 1.5 more days. Now, after direct examination, of course, there's cross-examination. Cross-examination might last a day or 2. After cross-examination, I anticipate that we'll have Linda on redirect for another morning or afternoon session. So Linda's going to be on that stand for a total of about a week. Let's face it, she is the proverbial star witness for the prosecution.
Vince, are you as far along as...
Vin, what is the particular purpose bringing out about the sex orgies at this?
As far as he was the one who was directing the entire affair.
Thank you, Vince.
Yeah.
Irv, I heard and counted 87 objections of yours to prosecution questions in the morning session, including objections to allusions to sex orgies at the ranch. Why so many objections?
Well, again, I prefer not to get specific because of the gag rule, the order that we not discuss matters that are before the court. But I will, but answering in a more general way, first of all, let me backtrack. I would be glad to go over with you when we get the actual record of these questions and answers, and let's haul down the books, haul down the rules of evidence, haul down the case law and the statutes, and see whether what has occurred is proper or improper.
I'm not making a legal judgment.
I appreciate that. The fact is, however, that if lawyers ask improper questions, then it's the obligation of the lawyer on the other side to try to do something about it. In fact, that's one of the techniques that a prosecutor has of getting a result at any price, no matter what, even though it's improper, even though the result is not a legal one. The prosecution has the power, by opening his mouth and saying certain things, to bring out certain material.
Now, you're the latest attorney to come into the case, and you didn't get to see any of the witnesses testify. When you argue to the jury, is this going to present problems for you?
Well, of course it is. Of course it is, because I'm in no position whatsoever to really comment upon the witnesses' demeanor, how they testify, the character of their testimony. I can't describe them. I can't comment on the manner in which they testified. I have to leave that to the jury because they saw them, and I have to beg the jury to in effect, do my job for me, which I'm helpless in doing.
Well, I'm going to concentrate mostly on the witnesses that testified against my client, Susan Atkins. Mm-hmm. And I think there's about 6 or 7 witnesses that concentrated on Miss Atkins and testified against her.
Irv Kenerick, what can we hear from you?
What's your question?
I'd like your opinion about Mr. Fitzgerald's presentation this morning. I'd like to know if it jibes with the other 2 gentlemen here. Also, I'd like to know, since you're Manson's attorney, what, if anything, you plan to tell the jury in particular?
Well, I'd like to say that that Mr. Fitzgerald certainly, in his argument to the jury, in this case, has shown that he deserves the reputation that he has for being one of the finest trial lawyers in this country.
Mr. Keith, number 1 question, how do you think Paul Fitzgerald is doing with his argument to the jury?
I think he's doing a very excellent job, a very thorough job. He's been very articulate, very dramatic in places, and I feel it's something that the jury is going to listen to attentively, and I do feel very strongly that that jury is impressed by the job he's doing.
Is that your client will have gotten a fair and complete trial out of this?
Well, I don't think I should comment on that. I think that's up to some other tribunal, perhaps.
All right. Mr. Shin, what is your comment on Mr. Fitzgerald's presentation this morning and on your own upcoming one?
Well, I think Mr. Paul Fitzgerald has done a wonderful job, and he's covering most of the main points. And I think he's going to be through this afternoon. Then I'll argue, and I'll probably take about 3-4 hours to argue.
Are there any particular points that you can tell us about now, or are you ethically allowed to do that before you actually present your case?
That what he is doing by way of argument is magnificent.
He looks tired and worn in there this morning, and as a matter of fact, none of you gentlemen look completely rested, and I'm presuming it's because of the length of this trial.
Well,
you work at night as well as daytime, I'm sure.
Yes, that's a very fair statement.
Uh-huh. Now, is there any particular thing that you'd like to comment on the fact that none of the defendants are in court at this time?
No, I don't think that because of the publicity order of Judge Keene and Judge Older, I don't think that I can comment upon. I don't think that I can fairly respond to your question.
Okay. Is there any particular thing you would like to comment on that I haven't thought to ask you?
Yes, I would like to comment upon the district attorney's continuing attempt to interfere with the fairness of this trial by the publicity that is finding its genesis right in the district attorney's office.
Now, I don't know if this will upset your case or not, but I think you got a heck of a good Christmas present there with that tie, Irv.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, gentlemen.
Thank you.
Morning, Charlie. Any comment at all?
Have a big laugh. Ah.
What effect, if any, will his turning himself in, especially in a dramatic fashion like this, have on the case that you gentlemen are concerned with upstairs?
Well, we hope it won't have any effect at all. It's an unrelated case, unrelated events, and he's unrelated to the factual and legal matters in the case presently on trial. He's not unrelated to the defendants. He was a friend and close personal acquaintance. Everyone knows that, but he's not connected with our defense.
Yeah.
Or.
I've been covering court cases for 25 years in this town. I've covered a lot of crazy ones, but nothing like this. What else new can happen in this one, Paul?
I don't know. I honestly don't know. It's an emotionally draining and fatiguing case. I get up in the morning and I ask myself what's going to happen today. It's been so bizarre, and actually, although I know a number of people think to the contrary, the attorneys in this case have made every attempt to make it into an ordinary conservative lawsuit and try it solely on the basis of the facts and the circumstances the prosecution had presented in their case, but it's just been impossible. Well, I think that's an intellectual possibility. The emotional reality to me is that he's simply isolated in some remote area up there, but that he's really all right. I certainly hope so. And the Sheriff of Los Angeles has been very, very helpful. They sent a search party up there, and they went through considerable efforts to make every attempt to find him, and I certainly hope they will, and I want to thank him very much.
How much longer can the events upstairs be stymied before the judge has to take some kind of action, and is there a chance for mistrial in this? Do either of you know?
There's a chance for a mistrial, and I would say that the case isn't going to be forestalled much more than 7 calendar days. At that point, we're going to have to proceed.
If you proceed, what can it be? The judge appointing another attorney for Ms. Van Houten, or will he simply declare a mistrial, or what will happen?
Well, there are a number of alternatives. He can declare a mistrial, in which case she'd be tried all over again in front of a new jury from the very beginning. Alternative number 2, I imagine, is to substitute in an attorney of her own choosing. However, that presents some almost insurmountable problems for an attorney coming in at this late date. Thirdly, I suppose the court could appoint an attorney in the event she didn't have funds to employ her own counsel. And I suppose, fourthly, she could represent herself and continue. I think that last possibility is not much of a possibility, in as much as that motion's already been made and denied. On the other hand, there are some tremendous problems in an attorney coming in at this late date and having to review all the testimony and not being faced with the witnesses, etc.
Day, is there anything you want to add to what Paul and you have already said?
No, I don't think I have anything to add.
All right. Thank you, gentlemen, very much.
you.
Oh, since you're a close friend of Ron Hughes, the mysteriously missing attorney, you must by this time be really worried.
Yes, I really am. I don't think that Mr. Hughes would have gone off out of Los Angeles and not notified someone unless he were in some kind of trouble or couldn't reach a phone.
What kind of trouble do you envision that he might be involved in?
Well, the only thing I can think of is that he's probably in nature somewhere where he can't get to a telephone and stranded.
Oh, you don't foresee any foul play or anything?
Well, I don't think there's any cause for that at this time.
Mm-hmm.
And, of course, it's possible, but I don't see any evidence of it.
When was the last time you saw Ron, and what did he tell you at that time about being in town or out of town?
I saw him a week ago Friday, the last day of the court session, and we had dinner together, and I told him at that time, he told me at that time that he was considering going to Sespe Hot Springs, and I told him at the time that I thought with the weather conditions the way they were that it might not be too good an idea, because the stream crosses the road up there, and during the rainy season it gets pretty wet.
Now, is there anyone else whom he might likely have left a message with or might have contacted since he's been gone?
Well, I've checked with some of his friends, and I haven't found any evidence of any messages. I found one message that was dated last Wednesday night, which evidently was on the door since that time, and that's the only one that I've come across.
A message that he left?
No, a message that someone left for him.
I see. Okay, what do you think will happen by tomorrow or the next day if he's not with us?
regard to the trial, you mean?
Yes.
Well, I could only make an assumption there that wouldn't really be valid, since I don't know, what the judge is going to do. I would assume the judge will either appoint another attorney or sever Leslie Van Houten from the case.
What's your full name?
Michael Green.
Okay, Michael, thanks very much.
You're welcome.
Who, man?
Who? Who would
You have
care
anything
for
to say to Charlie,
Are you talking
Bruce?
about Charles?
You have anything to say to Charlie?
You can't say that to Charlie.
Why? What do you mean you can't say that to Charlie?
Well, are you...
Huh?
Are you coming back here for Charlie Manson? You feel like you're helping him in some way?
Well, they want to kill bodies, don't they? Is that what they're after?
But how can you help by coming back now?
Can you give us a...
You're giving up for what? Why have you decided to come back now? What can
It's
you...
time.
Yeah, but why? Why is it time
Why?
now?
Give the answer.
What are you going to do?
Well, I'm just going to put myself here for right now.
But how can you help Charles Manson or anybody else? We're all together.
We're just going to say what's true.
What is true?
Don't look to me. Tell you the truth.
Bruce, you have anything to say generally?
Generally.
Yeah.
What's being done in exchange for you giving yourself up?
whatever's being done.
Do you know what's being done? Have any deals been made, and if so, what are they?
Well, some people were supposed to be cut loose.
Who are they?
Who?
Mary Bruner, for one?
What is the deal?
How about Nancy Pittman? Is she being kicked loose too?
Are you going to testify at all during this current case trial? Do you plan to, Bruce, in exchange for Brenda's release?
Mr. Shin?
What do you plan? Do you have anything at all right now? We just want to know what it is that you feel that you can do now for Charlie Manson or for anybody by coming back now. Is it what do you feel that you can
arrangement
do?
have you made to bring him
What
in?
can you say?
What's been promised?
Well,
As far as I know, nothing has been promised. The girls negotiated, and the girls had it brought
It's
in.
important that you showed up
Has there
at
been
this
any
time.
kind of arrangement made at all?
That I don't know of.
Why was it decided in his best interest to bring him in, for him to come in, surrender voluntarily?
Well, that I don't know.
You know that you'll be facing murder charges?
Is that all?
But you do know that.
Well, who is it
Well,
that
they're putting murder charges on everybody.
Are you guilty of murder?
Are you guilty of murder? You asked the question.
Yeah, I'd like an answer.
Well, it's in you.
Well,
Don't look to me for your answer.
Well, you're going to have to defend yourself in court sooner or later. What will your answer be there? When you're arraigned, will you plead guilty or not guilty?
Guilty? Oh, that's your guilt. That's the guilt of who would want me to, whoever says it.
Who is it that you feel that you are helping or releasing or cutting loose by coming back?
Coming back.
Well, coming to here, coming to this corner today. Who are you cutting loose by coming here? You use that word, cutting loose.
I understand you got married in Las Vegas a couple of 3 months ago. Is that correct?
Man,
You said you were doing this for Charlie, is that right?
for Charlie, I'm doing it for me, man.
But what are you gaining out of it? What are you?
I'm just getting to do it.
You're getting to do what?
To do what I do.
Which is what?
Which is whatever I do, man. You just have to watch.
Where do you go from here right now? Expect to be arrested?
Excuse me, John.
I think you people have had enough. Let's go.
A dancing clown upon the wall is calling all to City Hall. Your grave is mine, oh can't you see? It's your own kind to be free. The truth I've known, you are the king. My love, this world to you I bring. You know, you can be free. Forget your kind and come to me. I whisper words, you come to me. This song I sing for all to see. The past is gone and now I know. Inside this cell, nowhere to go. Oh love, I love, look at your love. Oh love, I love, look at your love. My word, the truth in words you've never heard. Why do they fear and see in me? It's God themselves, I know you see. Oh love, I love, look at your love. Oh love, I love, look at your love.
Irving, first, Charlie Manson and his three female co-defendants are listening to final defense arguments in the murder trial from cells behind the courtroom. They're still locked out of the courtroom for misbehavior. Meantime, the 7-man, 5-woman jury is getting it firsthand from defense attorney Irving Kenerick. Do you have some idea when you will wind this up?
Well, the fact of the matter is that what we're trying to do is trying to just get the highlights, and it's somewhat analogous to General Eisenhower. Just for an example, there's certain staff work that has to be done before you can start D-Day.
Day, I'd like your opinion of Mr. Kenerick's closing argument.
Well, I think that most of the subjects that he's covering now, I think was covered by Mr. Paul Fitzgerald when he made his closing arguments. Mm-hmm. And I think that Mr. Kenerick is going into more detail, which I believe that is not necessary at this time.
I see. Irving Kenerick, Charles Manson's attorney, is in the third day of his summation to what appears to this reporter to be a bored jury. He is up to page 12,005 of a 30,000-page transcript. So far, he's covered the French Revolution, the Watts riots, the Chicago 7. He has quoted former General Eisenhower, Harry Truman, and several other politicians. Where he will go from here is anybody's guess. He's been accused of conducting a filibuster, and he says he is still not through. This is Dick Hathcock, Channel 5 News reporting. I want to say that I'd like you to move over a little because I'd like my blue suit to show instead of yours. Irving, what page of the transcript are you on now?
Well, the actual page, of course, in preparing a final argument, it isn't, one does not progress seriatim through the transcript. What you do is you integrate issues, and that's what makes the task somewhat difficult.
Well, the only reason I ask is somebody has likened this to a filibuster.
Well, I think that, again, the filibuster is like we spoke about the genesis of an objection. The genesis of an objection is the original improper question. Now, the genesis of whatever you want to call a filibuster or whatever is the fact that the prosecution has put on a 6-month trial here. In fact, there has been nothing by way of because of the presumption of innocence and the fact that the prosecution has to prove their case, which some people don't believe necessarily has occurred.
Do you believe that the prosecution has failed to prove a case against Mr. Manson?
Well, I'd rather not get too explicit about it, but the fact is, nevertheless, that have a situation where the jury, they are people that have to more or less go through this horrendous record. And actually, the time that's involved in this and what's been going on here, actually, it's just a couple of days.
Let me ask you this now. Yesterday, Charlie shouted at you to sit down, that you weren't proving a point or some such thing. Did this throw you off at all? Does it distress you when Charlie injects himself into this?
Well, again, my subjective feeling is really that's not important. Harry Truman made the statement, if you can't stand the heat, stay out of the kitchen. And law is a very unusual process.
And you're a very unusual attorney. Thank you, Irving.
Thank you.
Irving, the prosecution has been